Good evening, and first of all, I want to thank Professor McNeil for his very detailed comments. I disagree with many of them, but he's obviously given a great deal of thought to this, and I appreciate his thoughtful division of how two different sides can view a problem from very different perspectives and come to very different conclusions. I want to thank Professor Allen for moderating and for the Hamilton Group and for the Human Rights Group for sponsoring. This is really the issue of our age, but it has not as much to do with the people we are hunting as it does who we are and who we've become since 9/11. I respect Professor McNeil for saying that we have to make a decision how we view these issues. And I think that's true. The United States has adopted a position that is virtually indistinguishable from China. By the way, we've adopted issues so similar to China, they actually complimented President Obama for his policies on surveillance, killing civilians. We have really found ourselves in strange company. But I do think that it's important to call things by their right names. In fact, there's a Chinese proverb that says the beginning of wisdom is to call things by their right names. So let's call things by their right names. We're not at war. No one's declared a war. And the problem with treating this by the law of conflict is we don't have a war. That has a meaning. National sovereignty has a meaning. It's not just human rights. It has a meaning that brings stability to our world. I am very frightened about the world we live in. And I don't have to be told about the threat of terrorism. I was passing the Pentagon when the plane hit the Pentagon. One of my friends was on the plane. It exploded in my rearview mirror while I was on the phone with my secretary. No one in D.C., no one in this area has to be told about the dangers of terrorism. The question is, are you so afraid of terrorism that you're willing to give up something that is essential in distinguishing us from those who hate us? I think we have given up a great deal. See, we've spent decades perfecting an international law that governs this world. Since World War II particularly, international law has become this edifice that has brought stability and peace to this world. Not perfect. We've had wars, but nothing like that which existed before it, because what existed before international law was a state of nature. It was a system where might is right. And World War II showed us what happens when we live in the state of nature. We needed to leave that state. We needed to embrace a system of law, the rule of law. And part of that is to respect national borders. I'll tell you what frightens me about the world we live in. It's the world that we're creating. I'm talking about the United States of America. We are returning the world to a state of nature. You know, when Professor McNeil says, well, there's been various arguments made, some are implied, some are not, I think that's generous. Even the Obama administration will admit that they have not come up with a single coherent argument for supporting targeted assassinations and all of the drone attacks. We don't even have an argument. I've been to debates in Paris with U.S. representatives who've admitted that we justify these attacks in different ways. But they have a hard time justifying them all. They have a hard time actually answering questions about the international basis for these attacks. What they have is the oldest justification of all. We can do it. For a long time, we were the only ones that could do it. We had the drone technology. It was the magic bullet. How could you not use it? 2 days ago, a report came out that said that 80 different nations have drone technology. So the bills come due. We broke down the international rules that govern and protect nations and said that we can act unilaterally to take out those who threaten us. Now other countries have the same technology. Do you think they're not going to make the same argument? You know, 2 years ago I debated Professor Etzioni, who's a wonderful philosopher, before NATO, the parliamentarians of NATO. And after I spoke about the world that NATO and the United States is creating, that I am convinced we will loathe what we're doing today. And I'm frightened for my children as to the world we're creating, because I've seen it. It's where we were. We've stripped away all the arguments we can use to keep other people from attacking us. And there was this baroness from England who said, well, you know, you Professor Turley, just don't seem to realize these are terrorists, you know, and not many people disagree that the United States is hitting genuine terrorists. Well, first of all, the baroness is wrong. There's lots of people who disagree with who we're hitting. But I said, you know, you would do me a great favor if you could just answer this, because she was a member of the English Parliament as well. And I said, I just really would love you to answer this. In 10 years, when Iran or China vaporizes someone on the London Bridge, are you going to be the first to stand up and say, well, you know what, that's their right. That person was threatening them. We weren't turning them over. Can you assure me that you'll step forward in the cameras to say, well, remember, this is about achieving stability and giving nations the right to protect themselves? And of course she said, well, we're not the same as Pakistan. But see, the problem is that the law does view it as the same. And by the way, I love the fact that Professor McNeil referred to WikiLeaks. I love how this administration first wants to prosecute everyone associated with WikiLeaks and is now using WikiLeaks to suggest we actually are justified in our attacks. Just look at what was leaked through WikiLeaks. But the problem is Pakistan's formal position is that they have asked the United States to stop these attacks. Now, I don't really care about that because I think there's a more poignant source. Leon Panetta. Because when the Pakistan came out and said, you are violating our sovereignty, they asked Leon Panetta, and Leon Panetta said, too bad. Panetta said, we want consent from Pakistan, but he said, that is not the sole question. We reserve the right to attack targets in Pakistan if we consider them to be threats to the United States. And in that statement, you really encapsulated the world we are creating, where national borders don't really mean much. It's just whether you're convinced that this person has to go. You know, we have lots of ways, of course, to do targeted killings. It's not just drones. You know, it was revealed that we did a pretty remarkable thing with a computer program that actually caused a building to explode in Iran, killing many of their scientists. The important thing is it's easy to look at this technology and get lost from the question. There's nothing special about a drone. What may be special about it in a practical sense is it's incredibly easy. And I think that's one of the dangers. You just tell a drone jockey out in the desert to take out a guy in Afghanistan. It's so easy. And by the way, the description of the baseball cards is even more chilling. The fact that the president gets baseball cards. Who writes what's on the card? Does this president really spend a lot of time saying, I want to talk to everyone who's put the stuff on this card? Or are they just going to look at the card and say, you know what, this looks like a bad guy, he should go? But that's what we have become. We've become the judge and jury of people all around the world. We just kill them because we are America. And we give no thought at all of what happens when China and Russia and Iran make the same claims. It's not just willfully blind. It's self-destructive. I am sure that my children will live to see the day when people start taking out targets on U.S. soil. What would have happened, by the way, for Mexico if the Mexican special forces, which are pretty good, by the way, took out someone in San Diego. By the way, they called bin Laden a capture-kill operation, but the SEALs later admitted it was a kill operation. So what if the Mexican special forces just go into San Diego and take out some targets, take out some people, say, look, we had to do it. How will we oppose that and not look like colossal hypocrites? How will we do that and have any credibility left in the world? Now, all the justifications that we have tried really haven't worked very well. That's the reason they're still struggling for a single explanation of why we can do this beyond American exceptionalism. One is hot pursuit, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard come out of a president's mouth. The reference to hot pursuit, which has been uttered by the Bush administration, has been uttered by the Obama administration, is bloody ridiculous. And anybody who teaches in this field, no one will give credence to a hot pursuit argument. Hot pursuit is a limited argument that comes out of maritime law. It was truly hot. It was pursuing a ship across national lines. There's no one I know of would suggest that drone attacks would be supported on hot pursuit. Consent. Leon Panetta said consent's not the justification, because we reserve the right to take out targets, even in the nations of allies, if we consider it important for our national security. So that's not the issue. Authorization of military force is not the basis. Even the administration has admitted that our targets fall outside of that. We're taking out people in Yemen. We're taking out people who have no connection to Al-Qaeda. We're taking out terrorists. And what Professor McNeil talks about of those side bets is particularly chilling. So apparently we're now killing people for other people just to get a chit. I don't see how you can make that justification without blushing. I mean, is that really a justification under international law? We're now killing people because people we need those people dead? What is astonishing about this is the complete disassociation with any coherent system of law. I'm not just talking about morality, I'm talking about the rule of law. What do we think is going to happen when we bring the world back to the state of nature? We're assuming we will always remain the strongest. That we can tear down this edifice and it'll never come back to haunt us. But all of those countries with drone technology, we're beginning to find that we're not going to be the strongest on the block, because technology is destroying this notion of large nations being all-powerful. Technology is sort of like the peacekeeper in the West. It was the great equalizer of men. Well, you know what? Drones and technology are going to be the great equalizer of nations. And when we're equal, and when we're in a state of nature, what will we say to object when people attack us? Except that we're just exceptional because of who we are. Now, to me that's a chilling issue. But when we call things by their right names, we're not at war with terrorism, if you're talking about constitutional law. If that's the case, if the president can unilaterally declare a war on terrorism, they can declare a war on anything. We have a system of law that requires a declaration of war. If we want to take out candidate targets in Pakistan, we need to be at war with Pakistan. If Pakistan is harboring our enemies, we might have to go to war with a country like that, but we can take other measures. Do you know the funny thing is? If we simply stuck with the rule of law, a lot of the nonsense that we see today probably wouldn't happen. It's ridiculous. I agree with Professor McNeil that I think that some people in Pakistan want us to hit these targets. And then publicly the country is saying that we're destroying their sovereignty. You can do that because we've created this fluid, nonsensical world where lines no longer matter. If we believe that Pakistan is harboring our enemies, we need to confront them under international law. And if they continue to harbor our enemies, we need to consider an act of war. But to do so within what's called a justified war. You know, there's two principles, the just war theory and justice of war. And before you get to the law of conflict, you still have to start with a war. And a just war is not just some throw-out phrase. It is the basis of international law. And no, it doesn't recognize a war on a category of crime like terrorism. Now, it doesn't mean that you cannot respond to imminent threats. And originally, that was the justification for the drones. But even the administration's not arguing imminence anymore. They're taking out people like these bomb makers. They're taking out people who are considered to be terrorists. We're cleaning up the world. Not doing a very good job of it, of course. We're killing thousands of people. The nation of Pakistan in polls are becoming decidedly anti-American, and we're generating more terrorists. But that doesn't seem to matter. We just increase the drone attacks. It's sort of like the theory that we'll continue to flog the crew until morale improves. We'll just keep on sending in more and more drones until you come to love us, or at least love the drone. In fact, much of what you hear from people supporting drones, mind you, a lot of that's Dr. Strangelove movie, right? Where the subtitle of Dr. Strangelove was How I Stopped Worrying and Came to Love the Bomb. And a lot of this argument of look at all the things we do strikes me as how I stopped worrying and came to love the drone. But, you know, with all the descriptions of Professor McNeil, I thought they were incredibly chilling. Everything that Professor McNeil described to me, I thought was horrific. Really? There's a person from the CIA and from the Department of Defense sitting in a room and they're making objections or reservations. Half the people that held those positions in the Bush administration, many of us thought should have been put in jail. But there's no real discussion of who those people are. All of this is classified. And by the way, when we say, well, there's a record in case we want oversight, oversight is a joke. And I don't know anyone that doesn't think that. I've testified before the House and Senate Intel committees. I've had a top secret special intelligence clearance since Reagan. So I spend most of my time in classified cases. And congressional oversight is a joke. And I've said that in testimony. It's a joke. And I don't know anybody that actually gives any credence to it. It's a revolving door among people that go back and forth to the intelligence agencies. If you want to see how much of a joke it is, take a look what's happening right now. You know, where these members, you know, are flailing around to deal with Snowden. Half of them admitting that they were aware of the illegal conduct that was conducted. Take a look at Clapper. Clapper went there, the national security, the director of national intelligence, and committed perjury. He went in front of one of those oversight committees. You didn't need this record. He went in a public hearing and was asked if the NSA program existed of collecting the surveillance on citizens, and he said no. Usually people get prosecuted for perjury. I've represented people prosecuted for perjury in such circumstances. And when they asked Clapper, he had this wonderful statement that I tried to pick the least untrue statement I could think of. I would love one of my clients to be able to get away with an argument like that. Just go in and tell the judge it was the least untrue statement that you could make under oath. But Clapper made it, and there's no investigation or prosecution. That's what oversight is in the United States. I'll end with this. We're not just talking about drones. The United States is doing fundamental damage to the rule of law. And I have to say, some NATO countries are beginning to object. I just spoke at the Dutch embassy, and that with all these Dutch parliamentarians. And I was very surprised that about half of them felt serious reservations about participating with the United States in drone attacks because they believed that the United States was now an enemy of international law. That's one of our closest allies. But putting that aside for a second, this administration is at war with the rule of law across the board. Some of those people being taken out by drones are U.S. citizens. And the president has used the same arguments of process to justify the killing of U.S. citizens on his authority alone. And when Eric Holder went to Chicago and announced the kill policy, something happened that I never thought I would see in my life. People applauded. A room full of judges and lawyers. He's a country you want to live in, that a president has that authority? Because I got to tell you, I think the framers would be horrified. And let me just say this. All of you probably heard, or maybe you haven't, one of the most chilling things I know of as a constitutional law professor came from Benjamin Franklin after the Constitutional Convention. And he walked out in Philadelphia, and a woman walked up to him. Her name was Miss Powell. And she said, "Well, Mr. Franklin, what have you wrought?" He looked at her and he says, "Well, is it a democracy or a monarchy?" And he turned to her and said, "Madam, it is a republic if you can keep it." To me, that's the most chilling statement ever made in the history of this country. What Franklin was saying is, we gave you a great country, but only you could keep it. When you start to say that a president can kill any citizen on his own authority and attack any nation based on his unilateral judgment, I think you failed what Franklin was talking about. We're not the nation we were. I hope that's not true. But your generation is going to decide whether it is or not.